All right, so I'm recording. So everybody worked out their license issues, started to use stuff. So let's see, we're through week 1, through week 2. We're in like a gap week. So I found from last semester that students need some catch-up time. So we have a gap week. If you're ahead, if you're already caught up, just keep moving ahead. You get like ahead of the class a little bit. Otherwise, use it to get caught up. And is there any issues to talk about? Any questions? Any hangups with Maya? The viewport not working, the tools aren't working, crashes, something, anything? Sure. Just make sure your graphics card drivers are up to date, and you could try shrinking down your viewport, like meaning just using this small window here, see if that speeds things up. You can try changing settings up here, like don't do shaded, make sure all this other stuff is turned off. This looks like it's color space. You can make sure there is like advanced rendering in the viewport stuff. So like here, make sure you're just on this viewport 2.0. Make sure this stuff, you haven't messed with it. This stuff will add weight. And then the other thing I was going to show you is that there might be some things and preferences. I know I was showing you the preferences window last time. Well, the shortcut is I can click this. Yeah, I just click this little button down here because I couldn't find preferences, and I know that this opens up preferences all. But you can go to display, and there's a bunch of stuff here you can try to mess with. The only thing I would say here is the render engine for Viewpoint 2.0. And you might want to try switching this up. And you can change all this stuff. And if like things starts acting really crazy and you don't know what the hell you did and stuff, don't worry, because restore default settings right here. And also remember I showed you there's that preferences folder you can delete. Then next time you're in Maya, it just rebuilds that folder. So anyway, with all of that, you can try all that and see if it fixes some stuff. Otherwise, you just have this like, once in a, just sometimes your hardware is just not gonna be happy with the product. I've seen it happen with Unity or with Maya or Blender or Houdini or Unreal. Just some hardware specs just don't do well. It's just a small roll of the dice, but it does happen once in a while. In either case, okay. In either case, I just want to go real basic today, and how to use tools and geometry so that things don't, to minimize the chance of things going awry. So get used to your outliner. It'll always show you the objects in your scene. I used the little menu up here to create stuff. Although, you know, you can always go to create, find everything as well. You want to use hotkeys, it's great. You know, that's what Chris is for. You want to speed up your workflows. So I just created a sphere and a cube. This is what geometry icon looks like. Now, whenever you click on something on the right-hand side, we have different windows. And if you noticed, these little icons appear shifting around, right? So this is what's known as the channel box, the attribute editor. The modeling toolkit is supposed to be like a bunch of hotkeys and a bunch of modeling stuff put together. So it's like super fast to model. You can try it out if you want to. I'm really interested in the channel box and the attribute editor. And if you look up here, it's these two. Now, the only thing I really want to say it's kind of hidden is this, the tool settings. This I'll use a lot. So whatever tool you have selected, even if it's just the select tool, which is just the arrow, just to select things, notice that there's settings for it. The move tool, notice as I'm moving different tools, the rotate tool, it's selecting it over here. Notice how our tool settings is showing the settings for that tool. Scale. Now I can go in and start selecting faces. Notice I'm kind of still stuck on the scale tool. Move back to the move tool, but notice I do something. I'm going to switch to another tool. Let's just say the extrude tool. And notice that the show manipulator, this tool is dealing with manipulating the extrude. Just notice that there's different settings for it. And so whatever tool you have, if you want to get, when you start getting a little bit more advanced and you're messing with the settings, just notice that the tool settings is kind of hidden and it's really useful for doing things. In either case, I'm going to pop back. All right. So channel box is the most reduced view of details of an object you have selected. Translate, rotate, scale. Notice like I have different things that I can click on to show this is P-sphere, this is polysphere 1, and there's some things I can change. And if I go into the attribute editor, look, P-sphere, let me bump back. P-sphere, P-sphere, shape, polysphere, P-sphere, P-sphere, shape, polysphere. So, and if I go to P-sphere, look, transform, rotate, scale, translate, and that's the same stuff here. So I'm going to change something. Let's just say we move this thing. Let me use the gizmo. I'm going to move it over here, right? See that X and Z changed? I didn't go up and down, just left, right, forward, back. Go over to attribute editor. Notice, same stuff, all right? Channel box is like a reduced view of the details. Attribute editor is like a full view of the details. Each of these tabs is like a major part of the object. If you're used Unity, you can think of this outliner as like the scene. These are the objects in the scene, and when you click on it, the inspector gets filled out with details. And so it's like these are like components. They're big sections of the object, and they're separated off about their details. So if I go back to the channel box and notice like P-sphere shape 1 doesn't have anything exposed, but you can do stuff. You can change like the scale right here. See that? Or you can just change the scale with the gizmo. Polysphere. Notice this is like the general details. This has to deal with the shape, which we'll look at a little bit later, but notice nothing's really exposed here. Inputs. This is like the only thing that's showing right now. And this, the input, this is like our construction, like when we created this thing. this is some of the raw data that went into creating the sphere: the radius, the subdivisions along the axis, the subdivisions along the height. So this is what's known as construction history, and you can delete it. Usually you want to keep it until it starts getting too heavy. And some programs make more use of the construction history than others. So in Max, there's like, I forget what they call it, but there's this whole like, you can, the history is very important when you keep doing modifications to it. You have like a chain of events of modifying the geometry. And in Houdini, it's even crazier. Like you never get rid of the history. But usually you model something, you do a very complex shape, and you get this massive list of inputs, history, and then you delete it all just because it's choked in your memory. Now, if I jump over to Attribute Editor, yeah, you have translate, rotate, scale, and there's a few other things like shear, and you can mess around with it, what this stuff is doing, but usually it's not used as much. That's why it's not shown in the channel box. And you can open up other stuff, like where the pivots are located. The pivot is the center of the object. In this case, it's the center of the sphere, but it doesn't need to be. You can move it. So let's see if I can grab it right here. Yeah. Notice as the pivot is now, I moved it back to like almost 1 space 0, and its pivot is offset from the center of mass, the center of geometry. So it's like rotating around it's rotating around the center point. Sometimes it's useful. So notice that the pivot related to the rotation can be different than the scale. And if we go to the scale tool, notice this is the pivot of the scale tool. Let me put like -2, go back toward the center of this thing. And notice that when I go to rotate, it's at a different pivot. So if you needed to, in more complicated situations, you can change the pivots. The rest of this stuff is kind of miscellaneous garbage that you don't really need to get involved in. But as you get more and more deeper into the programs, you'll get more understanding of like, and you'll be hunting around in these deeper levels to get more customization. There's just a million settings. It's just how complicated the software is. Now the shape. What I will do is I'll select the sphere and say modify center the pivot, and it puts the pivot back in the center just because it was bugging me. Now, this is like the general attributes. Here's shape attributes. So, like how much your max tessellation, how far can you push this? This is very common. This you don't need to worry about now, but a piece of a mesh is common, max out at 60,000, 60K triangles. It's just some of the, but you can change it if you needed to. Displaying back face culling. I was kind of messing around with that like 2 classes ago. But a lot of this stuff is a little bit advanced, not really worth like but the smooth mesh preview, I was messing around with that. But if you turn it on and you can display the subdivisions, this is how you, a sphere, you're not gonna like be able to see too much. But let's see, if I take this cube here and I turn on smooth mesh, you see that you can really smooth it down to a sphere. And sometimes you want to see how it's divisions and stuff, and you want to turn this stuff on. But anyway, smooth mesh might be interesting. If you need to mess around with how it's rendered, and it's not really, a lot of this stuff is a mess with. That's why it's not shown in the channel, the channel box. This one's a big one. This is the construction history. So if I go back to the sphere, because this is kind of where we started with, you'd recognize the radius and the number of divisions to start with. Sometimes you need a lot, sometimes you need a little bit, sometimes you need a different axis. Cube has the same stuff with height, depth. Now you can model, you can do this stuff with modeling too. Just some stuff it makes sense to do in construction history. Sometimes it makes sense to do it with like modeling tools or scaling tool, like modification tools. There's no one way, there's like infinite ways to get something done. Um, it's just getting used to whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. Um, so that's the cube, has this stuff in its construction history. Then I'll just say, if you ever needed to, you say edit, delete by type history. Notice that now I don't have access to that construction on the cube. It's missing. I go over here and it's missing here. There's no inputs. I deleted it. And then as you do stuff to the object, extruding, adding edges, beveling, whatever Chris teaches you, notice I'll go back to channel box. Now there's an input. I extruded. And here's the history of the extrusion. So if you ever need to go back and change it, you can. But normally, some programs are really meant to mess with the history, and some are not. When you get a big chain of inputs, and just keep modifying 10, 20, 30 chain of inputs, you're like, oh, wait, I want to go back. And you like go up the list of inputs and you change stuff, you'll get very erratic results because Maya's not really meant to work like that. So normally you'll get used to saving a lot of different save versions. Be like, oh, I got to jump back a few. I messed up. I got to jump back a few save versions. That's the normal workflow. You'll just get, and you're going to crash a lot. These programs are unstable at times. And you just get, you can feel it when things start to chug or this or that. You'll be like, oh man, I better save. I'm going to lose all my work. Trying to smooth mesh and stuff doing. It's probably because I messed with the smooth mesh features. Oh well. You can look into like this automatic saving. Save preferences. Oh no, that's save the actual preferences of the project. Increment and save will just increment your scene a number. But there is no, it's in the project. No. Must be in settings. Nah. There is a way to like it saves like every 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I wouldn't get used to that just because it's such a bloat of files. I would just you're going to lose work at times. You forgot to save, you did something risky, crashed. I would just get used to saving often. Like something happened, you go file save a new name. Now what else is, let's see. So yeah, this is notice that my extrude now is its own tab. So every operation you do turns into like another tab and all of its settings are remembered and changed. And then like the shader that's on the object, in this case it's just a Lambert. Here it is. Like you can have access any part of your geometry pretty much right here. So when you're smooth meshing, if you ever need to do that, notice how you're getting the sharp edging up here and it looks weird. It's because there's not a lot of resolution up here. So insert edge loop tool is going to be a big friend of yours. So I'll just go into smooth mesh and notice as I drop the edge down, notice it kind of like holds the volume more. So you're gonna get used to doing that. Notice how it kind of like bulbs out down here. And maybe you don't want that bulbiness. So if you drop one down, it'll be like a little tighter. So resolution is good. Just know that you'll get used to knowing when to add it, when not to add it. to optimize your geometry for the game engine. If you don't like stuff like, oh, this is too many edge loops, I'm going to double click that one. And if everything is a nice quad, it'll go around nicely. If it's not a nice quad, it's not going to go around nicely. But you have that little thing, you can delete it. Boom, that looks good. I pressed the G key to repeat, G to repeat the last operation. And then maybe throw this out. And then maybe it's like too sharp. Maybe that one edge loop, maybe I need to double it up. And I think that's the bevel tool. Bevels come in very handy. Yeah, notice one edge turn into two. And you can like, how much do you want to offset them? How many segments do you want in between them? That's nice for whatever I'm trying to do. You can change the type of like, this isn't changing. Oh, chamfer. So how like rounding you want, like in that bevel. So just tons of options that you're trying to like achieve your look. And remember, it all gets brought up into the history. So you can change history. Notice I've got a lot of inputs. And the top is most recent. So you can mess with those, but if you go down toward the bottom, normally this is where you're going to get into a lot of issues if you mess with the big twists. Like, yeah. So like, notice like it added a lot of edges, but now there's like edges. So this is bad edge flow. Notice that they're overlapping, and there's this weird shadering. There's this black art. It's called artifacts. That's bad. So this is called bad topology edge flow. Maybe you can go in and like manually fix it, but usually not. And you should. That's why you just can't mess with the edge, mess with your history. Like, it's just a mess now. It's broken. So to undo that, just not mess with the history. It's just now the vertices are just overlapping, and I don't know what's going on. All right. And then I guess the B key is really useful. So you have to so when you select stuff, you're only selecting the vertices and manipulating them. You're not manipulating the others. But you can select a few or whatever, press the B key, and then this is like the brush tool. So you get like a soft fall off. So if I hold the B key, I can shrink like the radius of impact. And of course, you can go to tool settings. This one's got a lot of settings. It's under some MSB settings somewhere else, but like you can adjust like the fall off. It's probably under selection, soft selection. Yep, here it is. You can adjust like the fall off of the effect and everything else. But the point is that notice it's a percentage of selection of impact. So maybe I'm selecting 100% impact on this, 50% on these, 25%, 0%. So notice as I move it or scale it or rotate it, it's not like a hard, not like it's either all moving or not moving. And you can get some nice modeling effects like that too. All right, and then don't forget you could. I got soft selection out. Press B key. I actually want a hard selection. I either select or don't select. And remember, harden and soften edge. I was messing around with it. Sometimes you want that hardness. Sometimes you want that like softness. I think because I'm smoothing meshing this one, it's not. You can kind of see it there. But what's really common is to select soften hard edges. So what that does is, you notice there's like a really big transition will get a hardening, in a less transition, less change will get a softening. Sets hard and soften edge. That means if the transition between faces is more than 30 degrees, it's going to get a hard edge between them. Otherwise, it'll be soft because it's more of a rounded. It's not transitioning as much. Is there any questions so far? So notice like with this ball thing, say like this sucks because I didn't want it such a sharp pull out. I didn't want it such a sharp transition, so I pressed the B key. And now it's like a soft push out. And maybe no, I want it softer. I'm opening up my influence. Right? But now it's influencing down there. So there's different like influence ways of selection. Fall off mode, volume surface. Notice how the cutoff, notice how it's like when I switch to fall off mode of surface, doesn't transition through this gap as strongly as volume does. So maybe in this situation, surface works better because I don't want it to like move through this object as much. But I'll use that tool, the soft select B key. Yeah, I don't think you get a soft extrude. That'd be interesting. Try an extrude. I don't think I've ever done a soft extrude, but no, it's all or nothing. Either the face is selected or it's but if I pop out, get off the soft select. How to select. So if I select face, if you double click, it selects it all. You shift the one next to it. Depending on the speed that you do it, if you do it really fast, sometimes it'll select it all. But if you do a little slowly, it'll try to select what's known as an edge ring. This way it'll be a little bit clearer. A ring, everything next to it. If you're dealing with all quads, the selection tools work really well. If not, it's going to act weird. Now, acting weird, you can see it here because this is all quads going up to a triangle, and then it doesn't know where to go. That's why it terminates. So selecting the edge ring or the face ring, it's coming all the way down, quad, quad, quad. It's easy to understand, and then we're at a point for the triangle, and it terminates. There's nowhere else to go. Same with here. Sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't. You just get really used to the way the tools work with different geometry. I wouldn't worry about these yet. You can select a ring of vertices, edges, or faces. You could switch selections. So say I selected vertices, but it was easy. So you have to think about what's the easiest way to select parts of a geometry. Vertex, edge, or face. Sometimes it's easier to select what you want with different components. But you can always grow and shrink your selection. So notice it like went around and grew it. So sometimes you want to grow, shrink. Sometimes you want to convert your selection. So I have a bunch of vertices. I can convert it to like edges. So it selects all the edges. Sometimes you have a tool that only works on faces, but it's easier to select, say, the edges, and then you can always convert your selection to faces. All right. Freezing the transform has to. Sometimes you move the thing over, and it just makes sense that you don't want numbers anymore. So like rotated it and scaled it, and for whatever reason, like this is it. This is like your perfect zero. Like this makes complete sense for whatever reason to be your zero space. So you can freeze the transforms and meaning like reset to your basics, but in this new pose. So sometimes that's useful. Pivots I kind of went over. Snapping is useful. So I think you see it better with just a regular cube. So sometimes you want to like, it's kind of hard to move something. Sometimes you want to snap or you want to be more precise. So if you hold the V key, you snap to vertex. Notice it's kind of like swimming along the surface of these objects. So sometimes you want to like snap the pivot right to like a corner, and then you want to like use V, snap to another vertex, like snap a corner to a corner. Sometimes you want to snap it to the grid. I think that's the X key. Notice that the pivot is staying on all the grid markings. Here's the pivot. You can notice that these get turned on and off, or these are snaps. Curve, I don't have a curve laid out, but so on. My keyboard, yeah, my keyboard doesn't have the right key to move the pivot. There used to be a hotkey I used to use all the time to move the pivot, but they're super useful. To like using the snapping tool and placing the pivot is like super useful. Hold on 1 second. Okay. For me, it was function delete. But in either case, here the pivot. So I can, okay, in the tool, okay, you can also go into settings, just click edit pivot. That's nice to know. So I'm going to hold the V key and it's going to snap to a vertex on this cube. Then I'm going to duplicate it out. And for this one, I'm going to hold the X key. I'm going to snap it to the grid. Notice it's a 1x1. It's a unit cube and it fits in the grid perfectly. And in this one, I guess you could hold the X and snap it to the grid. But usually I hold the V key and now I can snap it to the actual vertices. So it's actually snapping to this vertex right here, holding the V key. I wouldn't be able to do that by hand. So sometimes it's super useful. So I'm just holding the V key, and if you need to build a structure like this for whatever reason, it's all aligned with the grid. It's perfect, and it's easy to snap to vertices. And notice that since the pivot is on the corner, when I scale, it's almost like this side isn't even moving because it's being scaled from that side. So it's super useful to say, no, this is like the edge of my screen. I only want to, you know, scale it up that way. So it comes all sorts, and it's you just don't know when these tools come in handy. So you just learn a lot of them, then you're just a lot more fluid down the road for whatever the situation you get into. Um, I think I'm done unless there's any questions. I guess I can just show you if you have an opening, I guess like this face, delete it. I got a big opening. I can, as long as everything's nice and quads, I double click the edge, got the whole edge there. And so there's a few different tools that you might be able to use, but usually I'll try a bridge. And if the bridge like looks weird, there's different settings you can mess with the bridge. But you see it just like filled up the hole. So that could be really useful. So even if you mess something up and destroy it, trust me, just contact on Discord, and like Chris has a million ways to like fix anything. All right. So hang out if you have questions. Otherwise, I'll see you next Tuesday, and I'll be online. I'll probably get tested first. I'll see. Let me see what's happening first before I decide that.
This is more of a general question, but if I encounter any difficulties during some other time in the week, should I just send you an email and we could talk then?
Yes, you can email me. I prefer to just do the Discord first, though. You can even at tag me so I get notified. But in general, just tag myself and Chris.
All right, thank you.
And so there's Chris's tag right there, and my tag is. But just contact us on Discord, and we'll see it right away.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Yep, and also Chris is available in the evenings, weekday evenings for one-on-one time, and yeah, I can help you during the weekday.